Duke Roland Whitmore accused his wife of treason before the foreign envoys had even risen from the negotiating table. Then, in front of 2 royal ministers, 3 ambassadors, and nearly every senior officer in the chamber, he lowered Genevieve's peace agreement into the fire. The blue ribbon caught first. Flames climbed across the parchment and consumed 6 months of work, while Genevieve stood between 2 palace guards, watching her husband destroy the agreement that might have prevented England from entering another ruinous war. "Roland," she said, keeping her voice steady, "that document contains the release terms for 200 English prisoners." He did not remove it from the flames. "It also surrenders 3 of our naval harbors to a foreign power. That is not in the agreement I negotiated." Roland turned at last. His black ceremonial coat was marked with the silver insignia of the Coastal Command, the military office the Crown had entrusted to him after years of honorable service. Until that evening, Genevieve had believed that responsibility would make him cautious. Instead, it had made his pride more dangerous. Beside him stood Lord Edmund Harcourt, the Secretary for War, holding a single sheet of parchment sealed with green wax. "This annex was intercepted yesterday," Harcourt announced. "It promises the Kingdom of Varennes unrestricted access to 3 English harbors, in exchange for recognizing Her Grace's private estates as independent territory." Shocked murmurs moved through the room. Genevieve looked toward the Varennes delegation. Their ambassador appeared as bewildered as the English ministers, but Harcourt had timed the accusation carefully. If any foreign representative defended her now, it would only make her appear guiltier. "Allow me to examine it," she said. Harcourt kept the page beyond her reach. "You deny recognizing your own signature? I recognize an imitation of it, and the diplomatic cipher beneath it. A cipher stored in the Foreign Office, where you have had unrestricted access for 12 years. Harcourt's expression barely changed, but Genevieve saw his fingers tighten around the parchment. Roland saw only her defiance. For the past 6 months, ministers had requested Genevieve's opinion before asking his. Newspapers had praised her judgment while criticizing his calls for a naval blockade. At dinners, men who once surrounded Roland to hear stories of his military service now crossed the room to question his wife about shipping law and Varennes court. He had never forbidden her work. He had done something quieter. He had begun to resent it. Genevieve had not received her position merely because she was a duchess. Her late father had served as England's ambassador to Varennes for 17 years, and she had spent much of her youth at its royal court. She spoke the language, understood its maritime laws, and knew which phrases its ministers considered binding. The Crown had appointed her as a special advisor and interpreter to the official delegation, not as the sole author of English policy, but as the one person capable of preventing a mistranslated clause from becoming a declaration of war. That knowledge had helped reopen 2 trade routes and secure the proposed return of English prisoners. Now it was being used to portray her as a foreign sympathizer. "Give the annex to Sir Thomas Bell," Genevieve said, indicating the elderly royal clerk seated near the king's empty chair. "He registered every page of the agreement. He can compare the paper, ink, and seal." Harcourt glanced toward Roland. "The Varennes fleet has already left port. Every minute spent indulging this examination gives them more time to reach the Channel." "That fleet is escorting merchant ships," Genevieve replied. "Its route was disclosed in the negotiations, according to information provided by the same people you defend." "I am defending facts." "No," Roland said. "You are defending yourself." The words struck harder, because he spoke them without anger. Genevieve looked at the man who had once listened to her translate dispatches late into the night, who had once told her that her mind was the quality he admired most. That man had not vanished in a single evening. He had retreated one wounded grievance at a time, allowing Harcourt to occupy the space left behind. Sir Thomas rose from his chair. "Your Grace," the clerk said carefully, addressing Roland, "the Duchess's request is reasonable. 10 minutes would be sufficient for a preliminary comparison." Genevieve watched her husband. This was the moment. He had not yet ordered a ship to sail. No soldier had died. No accusation had passed beyond the chamber. He could still choose examination over humiliation. Harcourt placed a mobilization order on the table. "If the annex is genuine and we delay," he said, "Varennes could seize the southern harbors before sunrise. The responsibility would belong to the commander who hesitated because the accused happened to be his wife." Roland's jaw hardened. Genevieve understood what Harcourt had done. He had transformed caution into weakness and made Roland's marriage the instrument by which his courage would be judged. "Read the order before you sign it," she said. Roland picked up the pen. "I will not place England's security beneath my wife's cleverness." He signed. The scratch of the nib silenced the chamber. The order authorized the Coastal Command to blockade Varennes' merchant convoy and deploy 3 naval squadrons before midnight. Once English ships fired upon that convoy, the peace negotiations would be finished, whether the annex proved false or not. Genevieve felt the true shape of her husband's betrayal then. Harcourt had supplied the accusation, but Roland had been offered time, expertise, and a neutral examination. He rejected all 3 because accepting them would require him to trust her judgment in front of men whose admiration he wanted for himself. A palace officer approached with a prepared royal warrant. Roland could not legally convict his wife, but as commander of the threatened harbors, he could formally endorse her detention until the Crown completed its inquiry. The officer waited. Genevieve looked at Roland. "If you sign that warrant without examining the annex, you are not protecting England. You are protecting your pride." For the first time, pain entered his expression. Then he signed again. The officer handed the warrant to the guards. One removed the silver diplomatic chain from Genevieve's shoulders. The other reached for her wrists. "Her rooms are to be sealed," Harcourt ordered. "No letters, visitors, or access to diplomatic papers." "That authority is not yours," Genevieve said. Roland's silence gave it to him. As the guards drew her hands together, the heat from the fireplace softened the green seal upon the alleged annex. A dark drop formed at its lower edge and fell onto the silver tray beneath it. Genevieve stared at the stain. Authentic Varennes sealing wax contained pine resin and powdered malachite. It softened beneath heat, but retained its deep green color. This seal had turned nearly black. Lamp soot, a cheap English method of darkening ordinary red wax. "The seal," she said. Roland had begun issuing orders to his officers. "Look at the seal, Roland." Everyone near the fire turned. Another black drop struck the tray. Sir Thomas stepped forward. "That is unusual." "It was made in England," Genevieve said. "The green color is only on the surface." Harcourt folded the annex before the clerk could reach it. "Heat alters wax. Not in that manner, and you know it." Roland's eyes moved from Harcourt's hand to the black stain. Doubt appeared briefly in his face. Genevieve waited for him to recall the winter she had taught him to distinguish foreign seals while helping him investigate stolen naval correspondence. He knew she was telling the truth. "Order Sir Thomas to examine it," she said. "If I am wrong, I will enter confinement without another word." Harcourt leaned closer to Roland. "If you countermand the fleet now, Every officer in England will know you allowed your wife to overrule you." Genevieve saw the doubt disappear. "Take her to the western apartments," Roland ordered. "She will remain there until the Crown's inquiry." The guards led her toward the doors. Behind her, officers gathered the mobilization papers and hurried from the chamber. Harcourt remained beside Roland, speaking to him in a low voice, while the last corner of Genevieve's agreement collapsed into ash. At the entrance stood Julian Vale, the young clerk who had recorded every revision made during the negotiations. His face was pale, and one side of his coat had been torn. As Genevieve passed, he stumbled into the nearest guard. "Forgive me." His hand brushed hers. A narrow fragment of parchment slid beneath her fingers. She concealed it before the guard pushed Julian away. Only after they entered the corridor did Genevieve open her hand. The fragment bore part of the false annex, along with a small section of its watermark. It was not the royal mark used by the Foreign Office. It was a crowned hawk, the private watermark of the paper mill on Lord Harcourt's estate. Below it, written so faintly that the fire had nearly erased it, was a date. The annex had been prepared 11 days before Genevieve completed the peace agreement it supposedly amended. Harcourt had planned the accusation before there was even a treaty to betray, and Roland had just given him England's fleet. By dawn, Genevieve's diplomatic chain, papers, and personal seal had been removed from the western apartments. Only Margaret Shaw, her longtime maid, was permitted to remain. Genevieve stood beside the window as naval couriers crossed the palace courtyard below. Roland's order had sent the 1st Coastal Squadron toward Varennes' merchant convoy. 2 other squadrons were preparing to blockade the southern shipping lanes. If the first commander obeyed his instructions, the English ships would intercept the convoy before noon. Margaret looked at the scorched fragment in Genevieve's hand. "Can the watermark prove Lord Harcourt forged the annex?" "It proves the paper came from his estate," Genevieve replied, "but Harcourt will claim it was purchased, stolen, or planted. We need the complete document and the Foreign Office register." She folded the fragment into a narrow strip and stitched it inside the hem of Margaret's apron. "Take this to Sir Thomas Bell. The guards will search me. They will search your pockets. They will not inspect a duchess's dirty linen." Margaret gathered several garments into a basket and approached the door. The guards examined the clothing carelessly before allowing her to leave for the servants' laundry. Genevieve did not know whether she would reach Sir Thomas. She only knew that waiting obediently would allow Harcourt to erase whatever evidence remained. An hour later, Roland entered. He had not changed clothes. Fatigue shadowed his face, but the mobilization orders in his hand suggested he had spent the night continuing the work Harcourt had begun. "Where is your maid?" he asked. "Attending to my clothing. While you are accused of treason?" "I was unaware that treason relieved a woman of the need for clean linen." His gaze moved across the room before settling upon her empty desk. "Harcourt says a piece of the annex disappeared after your arrest. And naturally you came to search your wife, rather than question the man who refused to let a royal clerk examine his evidence. I came to give you another opportunity to explain." "You already gave me one." "Then you signed the warrant before I could use it." Roland's expression tightened. The Varennes fleet changed course during the night. Merchant convoys alter course when armed English ships sail toward them. They are moving south, toward the route specified in the agreement you burned. For a moment he said nothing. Genevieve crossed the room and stopped before him. "You know the seal was false. I know its color changed near the fire. You once watched me expose stolen naval orders using the same method. That was 6 years ago. Wax has not changed because your opinion of me has." The answer wounded him, but he covered it with anger. "Do you believe I resent you so deeply that I would endanger England merely to humiliate you? I believe Harcourt knew exactly what you resented and placed it in front of you, wearing the appearance of patriotism." Roland looked toward the locked door. "He warned me that your private correspondence with Varenne had increased. I was negotiating the release of English prisoners. He said several letters were omitted from the official register. Then examine the register. Harcourt has already secured it." Genevieve almost laughed, though there was nothing amusing in the answer. "You gave the man accusing me control of the records that could prove my innocence." Roland's face changed slightly. He had not considered it in those terms. Before he could respond, a violent knock struck the door. A naval courier entered without waiting for permission. Salt had dried across his coat, and blood marked the bandage around his left hand. "My lord, there has been an engagement off Dover." Roland took the dispatch. "The 1st Coastal Squadron intercepted the Varenne convoy shortly before noon." The courier continued. "Our commander ordered the foreign vessels to lower their flags and submit to inspection. They refused." "And who fired first?" Genevieve asked. The courier hesitated. "One of our ships, your grace." Roland lifted his eyes from the report. "How many casualties?" 17 English sailors confirmed dead, at least 30 wounded. The Varenne escort withdrew after returning fire. Genevieve closed her eyes briefly. 17 men had died because Roland had preferred an immediate display of strength to 10 minutes of examination. "There is more," the courier said. The squadron commander received revised instructions before the engagement. They ordered him to seize the leading merchant vessel. "I issued no revised instructions," Roland said. The courier handed him a second sheet. "It bears your seal." Roland inspected it. "This is genuine." "Not necessarily," Genevieve said. "Harcourt has controlled your dispatch office since last night. The pilot who delivered it claimed he left London yesterday afternoon," the courier added. Roland went still. He had not signed the mobilization order until late that evening. The false instructions had been sent hours before Genevieve was accused. Proof that someone knew Roland would commit the fleet before he had made the decision himself. Genevieve watched the realization settle over him. "Recall the other squadrons," she said. Roland turned toward the courier. "Suspend the blockade. No English vessel is to fire unless attacked. And release me," Genevieve added. His hesitation returned. The courier was still present. The guards were listening outside. Freeing her now would require Roland to acknowledge before his own men that he had imprisoned his wife on evidence he had refused to examine. "The detention remains until the inquiry is complete," he said. Genevieve stared at him. Even with English blood on his orders, he was still bargaining with his pride. "Then understand this clearly," she said. "I will help prevent the war because innocent men should not pay for your choice, but I will never again mistake your fear of humiliation for duty." Roland flinched, then left with the courier. Margaret returned shortly after sunset. Her basket was empty, and fear had drained the color from her face. "Sir Thomas received the fragment," she whispered. "He recognized the watermark. Where is he now?" "Gone. Harcourt's men searched his office less than 10 minutes after I left." Genevieve's pulse quickened. "Did he send anything back?" Margaret drew a small registry card from beneath her cuff. On it, Sir Thomas had written only 2 sentences. The document burned in the chamber was not the agreement registered yesterday. The registered copy has disappeared. Below the message was the identification number of the person who had removed it from the archive. Genevieve knew that number. It belonged to Roland's private secretary. Genevieve read the registry card twice. Roland's private secretary, Nathaniel Crane, had removed the agreement from the Foreign Office 3 hours before the banquet. Crane had served Roland for nearly a decade. He managed his military correspondence, guarded his signet, and prepared documents for his signature. If Harcourt had gained Crane's cooperation, he would not have needed to steal Roland's authority. He could manufacture it. "Did Sir Thomas leave willingly?" Genevieve asked. Margaret shook her head. The servants saw 2 War Office officers escort him into a carriage. Genevieve went to the door and demanded to speak with Roland. He arrived 20 minutes later with Harcourt beside him. "Sir Thomas Bell has been detained," Genevieve said. "On whose authority?" "He removed government property during an investigation," Harcourt replied. "He identified your watermark on a forged annex." Harcourt gave a thin smile. "Paper from my estate is sold throughout London." Genevieve handed Roland the registry card. "Your secretary removed the real agreement before you accused me." Roland studied the identification number. Crane was acting under instructions. "Whose?" "Mine," Harcourt said. The document had to be examined for hidden concessions. "You removed the evidence before announcing the crime. I secured it. Then produce it." Harcourt did not answer immediately. That hesitation was enough. Roland turned toward him. "Where is the agreement?" "In the War Office archive." "Send for it. A search is already underway." Genevieve watched Roland's expression harden. For the first time, Harcourt had failed to provide him with a convincing answer. "There is another copy," she said. "The Varennes delegation retained its counterpart after yesterday's negotiations." Harcourt stepped forward. "Foreign diplomats cannot be permitted to interfere in an English investigation. They do not need to interfere. They need only place their copy beside the document you accused me of amending." Roland looked at Genevieve. "The Varennes envoys are preparing to leave London." "Then we have very little time," Harcourt objected, but Roland ordered a carriage and allowed Genevieve to accompany him under guard. He did not release her or return her diplomatic chain. Even now, he wished to discover the truth without publicly admitting that she might be innocent. The Varennes delegation had taken refuge at its embassy. Armed guards stood outside, and travel cases filled the entrance hall. Ambassador Laurent received them coldly. 17 English sailors and 9 of our own are dead," he said. "Your government burned the agreement before witnesses and attacked a civilian convoy. What remains to discuss?" "The agreement itself," Genevieve replied. "Do you still possess your counterpart?" Laurent studied the guards beside her. "Am I speaking to England's advisor or its prisoner?" "Both, apparently." After a moment, he ordered his secretary to bring the document. The Varennes copy bore the same blue ribbon and numbered pages Genevieve had prepared. Laurent placed it on the table, while Roland removed a transcription of the alleged annex from his coat. Genevieve examined the binding first. Every page of the treaty had been sewn together with one continuous silk thread. The final knot remained covered by the wax impressions of both delegations. No page had been removed, and no additional sheet could have been attached without breaking those seals. She opened the document to the final clause. "This agreement contains 24 numbered articles," she said. "The alleged annex calls itself Article 27. Roland looked down. "There is no Article 25 or 26, Genevieve continued. "Harcourt's forger copied a numbering system from an earlier draft. The final agreement was shortened 3 days ago." Laurent's secretary brought the negotiation ledger. It confirmed that Articles 25 through 27 had been removed by mutual agreement before the final copies were prepared. Roland read the entry in silence. The proof was simple, visible, and witnessed by both governments. He had only needed to look. "The annex is false," he said at last. Genevieve felt no relief. His admission could not restore the dead sailors or erase the moment he had chosen to condemn her. "Then remove the guards," she said. Roland hesitated. "I must present this to the Royal Council first." Laurent's expression turned contemptuous. Genevieve felt something inside her marriage close quietly. Roland believed her now, but he still valued the appearance of procedure more than repairing the humiliation he had inflicted without any procedure at all. Before they left, Laurent stopped Genevieve. "There is something else." He opened a locked dispatch box and withdrew a letter dated 11 days earlier, the same date found upon the forged annex. It had been sent to Varennes' naval ministry and warned that England intended to abandon the negotiations. The letter instructed the merchant convoy to alter its course on the morning of the expected blockade. At the bottom appeared Nathaniel Crane's signature. Above it was the impression of Roland's private seal. Roland stared at the page. "Crane could not have known I would order a blockade." "No," Genevieve said, "but Harcourt did." Laurent turned the letter over. A second message had been written on the back in an English commercial cipher. Genevieve translated it slowly. "Once the first shots are fired, peace will become politically impossible. The Whitmore contracts may then proceed at the wartime rate. Roland's family company supplied rope, canvas, and timber to the Royal Navy. If war began, the Whitmore estates would make a fortune. Harcourt had not merely made Roland the instrument of the conflict. He had made him appear to be the man who paid for it." Roland read the coded message again during the carriage ride back to the palace. The Whitmore family had supplied naval timber and canvas for 3 generations. In wartime, the value of those contracts could double. The letter made it appear that Roland had engineered the blockade for profit and used his wife's arrest to silence the one person capable of exposing him. "Harcourt intends to blame us both," Genevieve said. Roland folded the letter. "He forged my seal, but you gave him the decision he needed. Without your order, the forgery would have meant nothing. I have admitted the annex was false, to me and one foreign ambassador. Before the council, I remain a traitor." Roland looked away. When they reached the palace, Harcourt was already addressing the royal ministers. Copies of the false annex lay across the council table beside the Whitmore naval contracts. "The Duke's sudden suspension of the blockade proves nothing," Harcourt declared. "He acted only after learning that evidence of his financial interest had been discovered." Roland entered with Genevieve and Ambassador Laurent behind him. "The annex is a forgery," Roland said. "The Varennes counterpart proves it." Laurent placed the complete agreement before the ministers. Genevieve explained the unbroken binding, the missing article numbers, and the false wax. Sir Matthew Greaves, the King's senior legal advisor, examined each feature before confirming her conclusion. Harcourt's accusation against Genevieve began to collapse. Then he changed direction. "If Her Grace did not forge the annex," he said, "perhaps her husband did. The Whitmore estates would profit greatly from war." Roland placed the letter bearing his seal on the table. "This was sent 11 days ago, before I issued any order." "By your own secretary," Harcourt replied, "with your own seal." Genevieve understood the trap. Harcourt no longer needed Roland as an ally. Now that the first shots had been fired, sacrificing him would make Harcourt appear to be the man who had uncovered treason inside the coastal command. A minister turned to Roland. "Where is Mr. Crane?" "No one has seen him since yesterday," Roland admitted. The council suspended Roland's military authority pending investigation. Genevieve's detention warrant was withdrawn, but her diplomatic position was not restored. Until the source of the forged documents was established, neither husband nor wife would be permitted to influence naval policy. Outside the chamber, Roland finally dismissed the guards surrounding Genevieve. "You are free to return to Whitmore House," he said. "Free? The warrant has been withdrawn. You publicly called me a traitor, stripped me of my office, and gave Harcourt access to my papers. Removing 2 guards does not restore what you took." His face tightened with shame. "What do you need?" he asked. It was the first question he had asked her since the accusation. "An independent inquiry led by Sir Matthew, with access to the War Office accounts, your dispatch room, and Harcourt's correspondence. I can authorize access to my own records, and the Whitmore contracts must be suspended." Roland looked at her sharply. "Those contracts support hundreds of workers. They also give Harcourt a believable reason to accuse you. Place the profits in trust until the inquiry ends. If you refuse, every piece of evidence I find will look like a wife protecting her husband's fortune. The demand would damage his estates and expose his family business to scrutiny." 2 days earlier, Roland would have rejected it immediately. This time, he removed his signet ring. "I will sign the suspension." Genevieve did not thank him. Correcting part of the danger he had created was not generosity. "And my papers," she said, "you will have them, not through you. They must be transferred directly to Sir Matthew. You no longer decide what evidence I may see." Roland absorbed the boundary in silence. Agreed. As they returned to the council chamber, a messenger arrived from the House of Lords. Harcourt had already petitioned for an emergency war vote, arguing that the attack near Dover proved Varennes could not be trusted. The vote would take place in 2 days. If Parliament authorized war, even a restored treaty might no longer stop it. Genevieve looked at the clock, then at Roland. "Find Nathaniel Crane," she said. "I will follow the money." For the first time in their marriage, they walked toward the same enemy without standing on the same side. By the following morning, Sir Matthew Greaves had secured Genevieve access to the War Office accounts and the Whitmore commercial ledgers. Roland signed the authorization without attempting to supervise her. It was a small change, but Genevieve noticed it. He was finally giving up control rather than disguising it as protection. She began with the Crowned Hawk watermark. Harcourt's paper mill recorded every government order by weight and destination. 11 days earlier, a package of diplomatic parchment had been delivered to a printer named Elias Ward in Fleet Street. The purchase was listed as a private order from Harcourt's estate. Genevieve, Sir Matthew, and 2 independent clerks went directly to the printing shop. Ward denied producing the forged annex. Then Genevieve placed the scorched fragment beside a sheet from his press. Both carried the same faint defect, a broken line through the Hawk's left wing, caused by damage to the mill's wire mold. "This paper came through your shop," she said. Ward's confidence weakened. Sir Matthew opened the account book taken from the front desk. One page had been removed, but the payment total remained in the monthly sum. Someone had paid Ward £40, far more than ordinary printing work required. "Lord Harcourt asked me to prepare 3 sheets," Ward admitted. "He provided the Duchess's handwriting and the diplomatic cipher. I believed it was a test for the Foreign Office." "Who collected them?" Genevieve asked. "Nathaniel Crane." Ward described Crane as frightened and unwilling. He had repeatedly asked whether Harcourt possessed enough influence to free someone from debtor's prison. Genevieve exchanged a glance with Sir Matthew. Find out whom Crane was protecting. Before leaving, she asked to inspect Ward's discarded trial sheets. One remained beneath a stack of invoices. It contained several failed imitations of her signature and a partial impression from Roland's private seal. The forgery could now be connected to Harcourt's paper, Ward's press, and Crane's access. But Genevieve still needed to prove why Harcourt had created it. The answer appeared in the War Office accounts that afternoon. 3 companies had recently offered to supply cannon, powder, and naval timber if Parliament declared war. Each had quietly advanced money to an investment office controlled by Harcourt's brother. The dates matched the preparation of the false annex. Harcourt had not created the crisis merely to gain political influence. He and his allies expected to make fortunes from the war contracts that followed. Sir Matthew studied the figures. These payments are suspicious, but Harcourt will call them private investments. Then we need the instructions that connect the money to the forgery. A clerk entered carrying a report from the city magistrate. Nathaniel Crane had been found. He had not fled England. Harcourt had hidden him in a private lodging near the river while using Crane's younger brother's debts to control him. Roland had located the address, but Crane refused to leave until he received written protection from prosecution. He also made one condition before he would testify, the clerk said. "What condition?" Genevieve asked. "He will speak only to you. He says the Duke must not be present." Roland stood in the doorway behind the clerk. The words struck him harder than an accusation. Crane had served him for 10 years, yet trusted the wife Roland had condemned more than the master he had obeyed. Genevieve gathered the forged fragment and Ward's account book. "Arrange the meeting," she told Sir Matthew. Roland stepped aside to let her pass. He did not ask to follow. Nathaniel Crane waited under guard in a magistrate's office near the river. He looked exhausted. His coat was creased, and several days of beard shadowed his face. When Genevieve entered with Sir Matthew, he rose, but could not meet her eyes. "Why did you help Harcourt?" she asked. "My younger brother owed money to one of Harcourt's creditors. Harcourt had him confined and threatened to keep him there until he died. That explains the pressure. It does not explain your choice." Crane swallowed. "No, Your Grace," he admitted, removing the registered agreement, carrying the false annex from Elias Ward's shop, and using Roland's seal upon the letter sent to Varennes. Harcourt had told him the deception would frighten both governments into accepting stronger English terms. Crane claimed he had not known sailors would die. "Why did you refuse to speak before the Duke?" Sir Matthew asked. "Because I warned him." Genevieve became still. 2 weeks ago, Crane continued, I told His Grace that Lord Harcourt had requested unusual access to his seal and naval contracts. The Duke said Harcourt was investigating the Duchess and ordered me to cooperate. Roland had been given another opportunity to question Harcourt before the banquet. He had chosen suspicion again. Crane produced a folded instruction he had hidden inside his boot. It bore Harcourt's handwriting and ordered him to obtain 3 sheets of paper, the Whitmore seal, and samples of Genevieve's diplomatic cipher. The final line read, "Once the Duke's pride is engaged, he will supply the order himself." It was the clearest evidence they had found. Sir Matthew arranged protection for Crane and his brother, then prepared a sworn statement for the parliamentary inquiry. But Harcourt moved first. By evening, handbills appeared across London accusing Roland and Genevieve of conspiring to provoke a profitable war. Harcourt announced that Crane's testimony had been purchased with Whitmore money and demanded that both husband and wife be tried for treason. The war vote was moved to the following morning. That night, Roland received a private visitor from Harcourt. Genevieve learned of the meeting only after Margaret saw the man leave Whitmore House. When she entered the library, Roland stood beside the fire, holding a prepared statement. "What did Harcourt offer you?" she asked. Roland did not attempt to deny it. "If I testify that you created the annex and manipulated Crane, Harcourt will withdraw the evidence against me. My command will be restored after the war vote." "And the Whitmore contracts? They would remain." Genevieve looked at the statement in his hand. 2 days earlier, Roland had sacrificed her reputation to protect his pride. Now Harcourt was offering him the same choice again, only this time Roland understood exactly what it would cost. "Will you sign it?" she asked. Roland stared into the fire. "If I refuse, I may lose my title's influence, the contracts, and every position I have spent my life earning. If you accept, you will keep those things by condemning an innocent woman a second time. You are my wife. That did not protect me the first time." He lowered the document. Genevieve's voice remained calm. "I will present the evidence tomorrow, whether you stand beside me or against me. But understand this. Harcourt deceived you once. If you choose him now, the betrayal will belong entirely to you." She left him alone. The next morning, Parliament filled before the bells finished striking 10. Harcourt sat among his supporters, while Genevieve waited beside Sir Matthew, Crane, and Ambassador Laurent. Roland entered last. He carried Harcourt's prepared statement in his hand. When the speaker called his name, Roland walked to the center of the chamber, unfolded the page, and began to read. Roland stood before the House of Lords with Harcourt's statement open in his hands. Genevieve could not see his face, but she recognized the first sentence. "My wife, Genevieve Whitmore, conducted unauthorized negotiations with representatives of Varennes." Harcourt leaned back with quiet satisfaction. Roland stopped. The chamber waited. He looked down at the remaining pages, then tore them once through the middle. A murmur spread across the benches. "The statement I was given is false," Roland said. "Lord Harcourt offered to clear my name and restore my command if I accused my wife." Harcourt rose immediately. "The Duke is attempting to save himself by inventing a conversation without witnesses." "No," Roland replied. "I am finally refusing to save myself at her expense." He placed the torn pages on the table. Roland admitted that Crane had warned him about Harcourt's access to his private seal. He admitted ignoring the warning because Harcourt claimed to be investigating Genevieve. Then he described the banquet, the false annex, the blackened wax, Genevieve's request for a neutral examination, and his refusal. "Harcourt forged the evidence," Roland said, "but he did not force me to believe it. He understood that I resented my wife's influence and trusted my pride to complete his work." Genevieve remained still. She had wanted the truth spoken publicly, but hearing it did not undo the humiliation. It only ensured that Roland could no longer hide behind deception. He continued. "I signed the mobilization order after refusing 10 minutes of examination. 17 English sailors died after that decision. Their deaths cannot be placed entirely upon the man who deceived me." The chamber fell silent. Roland surrendered his remaining naval authority and placed all Whitmore war profits under independent control. He also requested that the family contracts remain suspended until the investigation ended. With those words, he gave up the power and money Harcourt had offered to preserve. Harcourt's supporters began whispering among themselves. Harcourt recovered quickly. "A remorseful husband is not evidence," he said. "The Duke admits he acted against his wife, yet now asks us to believe they are united in blaming me. Where is Nathaniel Crane, the only man who could confirm this convenient story?" Sir Matthew turned toward the witness entrance. Crane had not arrived. A court officer entered and whispered to him. The carriage carrying Crane had broken an axle on the Strand. He was unharmed, but would not reach Parliament before the scheduled war debate began in the Commons. Harcourt smiled. Then there is no witness and no proof that I ordered any forgery. The proof does not depend upon one frightened secretary, Genevieve said. Every face turned toward her. She stepped forward carrying the Varennes agreement, the scorched fragment, Ward's account book, and Harcourt's written instruction. The Lord Chancellor checked the clock. The Commons vote begins in less than 1 hour, Your Grace. If you intend to prevent it, present your case now. Genevieve placed the document her husband had burned beside the agreement that had survived. This time, Roland stood behind her without authority, argument, or control over what she would say. And Genevieve began. Genevieve began with the treaty. She showed the Lords its 24 numbered articles, the unbroken silk binding, and the seals placed over the final knot. The alleged annex called itself Article 27, even though Articles 25 and 26 did not exist. The forger worked from an earlier draft, she said, not from the agreement completed last week. She then placed the scorched fragment beneath a lamp. The crowned hawk watermark appeared clearly. Elias Ward was called into the chamber. He identified the paper as the same damaged stock delivered from Harcourt's estate, and admitted receiving £40 to prepare copies of Genevieve's handwriting. Harcourt remained composed. A printer facing prosecution will say whatever protects him. Genevieve opened Ward's account book. The payment had passed through an investment office controlled by Harcourt's brother. The same office had received money from 3 military suppliers shortly before the forged annex was created. Finally, she presented Harcourt's written instruction to Crane. Once the Duke's pride is engaged, he will supply the order himself. The chamber erupted. Harcourt examined the paper and laughed. You accuse me of forgery, while presenting a letter that could itself be forged. Where is the witness who supposedly received it? Before Genevieve could answer, the doors opened. Nathaniel Crane entered beside a magistrate and 2 guards. His delayed carriage had arrived minutes earlier. Crane testified that Harcourt ordered him to remove the registered treaty, obtain Roland's seal, and collect samples of Genevieve's handwriting. He also admitted delivering the false instructions that caused the English squadron to seize Varennes' merchant vessel. I obeyed because Lord Harcourt controlled my brother's debt, Crane said. But the Duke gave him access after I warned him. Roland did not look away from the chamber. The witness confirms my failure, he said. It does not excuse it. That answer denied Harcourt the defense he wanted. Roland was no longer attempting to escape responsibility by shifting all blame elsewhere. The Lord Chancellor ordered the war vote suspended, while Harcourt's accounts were examined. He also issued a warrant preventing Harcourt from leaving London. For the first time, Harcourt's composure broke. Then, a naval messenger hurried into the chamber, carrying an urgent report. A Varennes warship had seized an English vessel in retaliation for the attack near Dover. Their government now demanded the release of the captured merchant ship, compensation for its dead sailors, and formal recognition of the original peace agreement before midnight. If England refused, Varennes would consider the negotiations ended. Members who had turned against Harcourt began calling for war again. Genevieve checked the clock. They had less than 8 hours. The agreement in front of her contained the terms both kingdoms had accepted, but the English registered copy had disappeared, and the Varennes counterpart did not yet bear the Crown's final ratification. Without a legally valid English copy, there could be no peace to recognize. Genevieve turned toward Sir Matthew. Find the missing treaty. Across the chamber, Harcourt quietly slipped a key from his pocket and handed it to one of his clerks. Genevieve saw the exchange. Whatever the key opened, Harcourt needed its contents removed before the treaty could be restored. Genevieve began with the treaty. She showed the lords its 24 numbered articles, the unbroken silk binding, and the seals placed over the final knot. The alleged annex called itself Article 27, even though Articles 25 and 26 did not exist. The forger worked from an earlier draft, she said, not from the agreement completed last week. She then placed the scorched fragment beneath a lamp. The crowned hawk watermark appeared clearly. Elias Ward was called into the chamber. He identified the paper as the same damaged stock delivered from Harcourt's estate, and admitted receiving £40 to prepare copies of Genevieve's handwriting. Harcourt remained composed. A printer facing prosecution will say whatever protects him. Genevieve opened Ward's account book. The payment had passed through an investment office controlled by Harcourt's brother. The same office had received money from 3 military suppliers shortly before the forged annex was created. Finally, she presented Harcourt's written instruction to Crane. Once the Duke's pride is engaged, he will supply the order himself. The chamber erupted. Harcourt examined the paper and laughed. "You accuse me of forgery, while presenting a letter that could itself be forged. Where is the witness who supposedly received it?" Before Genevieve could answer, the doors opened. Nathaniel Crane entered beside a magistrate and 2 guards. His delayed carriage had arrived minutes earlier. Crane testified that Harcourt ordered him to remove the registered treaty, obtain Roland's seal, and collect samples of Genevieve's handwriting. He also admitted delivering the false instructions that caused the English squadron to seize Varennes' merchant vessel. "I obeyed because Lord Harcourt controlled my brother's debt," Crane said. "But the Duke gave him access after I warned him." Roland did not look away from the chamber. "The witness confirms my failure," he said. "It does not excuse it." That answer denied Harcourt the defense he wanted. Roland was no longer attempting to escape responsibility by shifting all blame elsewhere. The Lord Chancellor ordered the war vote suspended, while Harcourt's accounts were examined. He also issued a warrant preventing Harcourt from leaving London. For the first time, Harcourt's composure broke. Then, a naval messenger hurried into the chamber, carrying an urgent report. A Varennes warship had seized an English vessel in retaliation for the attack near Dover. Their government now demanded the release of the captured merchant ship, compensation for its dead sailors, and formal recognition of the original peace agreement before midnight. If England refused, Varennes would consider the negotiations ended. Members who had turned against Harcourt began calling for war again. Genevieve checked the clock. They had less than 8 hours. The agreement in front of her contained the terms both kingdoms had accepted, but the English registered copy had disappeared, and the Varennes counterpart did not yet bear the Crown's final ratification. Without a legally valid English copy, there could be no peace to recognize. Genevieve turned toward Sir Matthew. "Find the missing treaty." Across the chamber, Harcourt quietly slipped a key from his pocket and handed it to one of his clerks. Genevieve saw the exchange. Whatever the key opened, Harcourt needed its contents removed before the treaty could be restored. Genevieve carried Harcourt's final instruction directly to the Admiralty. A courier could not reach Dover before sunset, but the Admiralty's semaphore stations could transmit a short coded order across the country far more quickly. The problem was authority. Roland no longer possessed naval command, and the treaty lacked the Crown's final ratification. Only the King and the Admiralty Board could countermand the prize crew and release the Varennes vessel. Genevieve returned to the palace with Sir Matthew, Ambassador Laurent, and the recovered agreement. Before the Privy Council, she presented the intact articles, Harcourt's ledger, and the order to destroy the merchant ship. The original terms remain unchanged, Laurent confirmed. If England ratifies them and releases our vessel, my government will suspend all retaliation. The king signed a replacement ratification page in the presence of the council. He then authorized the Admiralty to release the captured ship, return its cargo, and investigate every officer involved in the false order. Genevieve drafted the final message herself. Minutes later, the semaphore arms above the Admiralty began to move. The coded order passed from station to station toward the coast. At Dover, Harcourt's prize crew had already moved the Varennes vessel toward the harbor entrance. Barrels of lamp oil stood open on the lower deck, ready to make the destruction appear accidental. The countermand arrived before the ship reached open water. Loyal harbor officers boarded the vessel, arrested the prize commander, and escorted the passengers safely ashore. At midnight, Varennes confirmed that its warships had withdrawn from English waters. No second battle came. The investigation that followed exposed the entire scheme. Harcourt had used his family's paper mill to create the false annex, Crane's access to obtain Roland's seal, and military suppliers' money to finance the operation. He expected Roland's wounded pride to produce the blockade order that Harcourt could not legally issue himself. Once blood had been spilled, he intended to push Parliament into war, award contracts to his investors, and blame the entire conspiracy on the Whitmores if the forgery was discovered. Harcourt was convicted of conspiracy against the Crown, falsifying government documents, unlawful detention, and provoking an unauthorized naval engagement. His estates were seized to compensate the families of the English and Varennes sailors who had died. Elias Ward avoided imprisonment after testifying but lost his government printing license. Crane was dismissed from service and received a suspended sentence because he had acted under coercion, though the court made clear that fear did not erase his responsibility. Genevieve's name was cleared by a formal declaration in Parliament. Every newspaper that had called her a traitor was required to print the correction. Roland was cleared of participating in Harcourt's conspiracy. He was not cleared of consequence. The Crown removed him from naval command for 5 years. The Whitmore military contracts were terminated, and Roland sold one of his hunting estates to establish pensions for the families of those killed near Dover. Before Parliament, he read the names of all 17 English sailors who had died after his order. When he finished, no one applauded. At Genevieve's request, Roland signed a deed of separation, granting her an independent residence, control of her income, and unrestricted authority over her correspondence. He also relinquished any influence over her diplomatic work. 3 months later, Genevieve returned to the same council chamber where her husband had burned the agreement. The fireplace was cold. Upon the table lay the completed peace treaty, now bearing the signatures and seals of both governments. Ambassador Laurent signed for Varennes. Genevieve signed as England's newly appointed Royal Commissioner for Maritime Affairs. Roland watched from the far end of the room, without uniform, command, or place at the negotiating table. After the witnesses departed, he approached her. "I once believed your influence diminished mine," he said. Harcourt recognized that weakness, but he did not create it. "No," Genevieve replied, "you chose it. I know." He did not ask her to forget the arrest, the burning treaty, or the 17 men whose deaths would remain between them. Instead, he placed the key to her independent residence on the table. "I will continue making restitution, whether you forgive me or not. That is the first promise you have made that does not require anything from me." Roland lowered his eyes. "Is there any future in which we speak again as husband and wife?" Genevieve considered him. He had finally told the truth when doing so cost him his command, fortune, and public standing. That mattered. It did not entitle him to her return. "Perhaps," she said, "but not because you regret losing me. Only if you become a man who would never choose his pride over the truth again." She offered no promise. Genevieve took the key in one hand and the completed treaty in the other. Then she walked from the chamber toward the carriage, waiting to take her to her own home. Behind her, Roland remained beside the cold fireplace. This time, the document survived. This time, the choice belonged to her.